Hey, good evening, little dreamers, little people, dreamers, big people, dreamers. Story for you this evening. Again, the Little People Big Dream books, running out of them. But some are on the way, they'll be ordered. But this is a really neat picture book. Actually, it's one of Miss Rebecca's favorite. And it's a biography about Joan Procter, the Dragon Doctor, the woman who loved reptiles. Real person, was once a little girl, had a big dream, and she loved reptiles. It's by Patricia Valdez, illustrated by Felicia Sala. Back in the days of long skirts and afternoon teas, a little girl named Joan Procter entertained the most unusual party guests. Slithery and scaly, they turned over teacups. They crawled past the crumpets, and while other girls read stories about dragons and princesses, Joan read books about lizards and crocodiles. Instead of a favorite doll, a favorite lizard accompanied her wherever she went. Each day after school, Joan retreated to her bedroom, where she studied lizards, snakes, and turtles. She took careful notes, just like a scientist. And on those days, Joan, when she was too sick to attend school, tiny toes and eager eyes cheered her up. The reptiles were quiet and watchful, just like Joan. For her 16th birthday, Joan received a most curious gift. It was a baby crocodile. She tied a little ribbon around its waist and took him for a walk. She even brought him to math class one day. The students shrieked. The teacher recoiled. Apparently, crocodiles weren't welcome at school. When Joan grew older, she skipped the parties and dances with her friends. Instead, she sought out the curator of reptiles and fish at the Natural History Museum. There, Joan and the curator talked snake scales, size, shape, texture, patterns, and even evolution. Sometimes Joan smuggled her crocodile to the delight of the curator. He knew right away that Joan was special. But soon those carefree days came to an end. England was at war, and women took up jobs left by men. The curator found himself short-staffed at the museum, and so he hired Joan as his assistant. Joan flourished at the Natural History Museum. As a scientist, she surveyed the museum's vast collections and published research papers on pit vipers and pancake tortoise. As an artist, she created exquisite models and drawings for the reptile exhibits. When the curator retired, Joan took over. Men returning from war were surprised to find a woman in charge, but times were changing, and Joan was leading the way. A few years later, the London Zoo decided to replace its old, outdated reptile house. The zoo director asked Joan to design a new home for the animals. Joan knew exactly how to keep the reptiles happy. She added elaborate lighting and state-of-the-art heaters that provided hot spots to keep the cold-blooded animals warm. She brought in plants and created artwork that mimicked each animal's natural environment. Joan took care designing one enclosure in particular. By this time, stories had emerged of a fierce man-eating lizard with a long forked tongue living on the faraway Indonesian island of Komodo. It was rumored to be 30 feet long, faster than a motor car, stronger than an ox. They called it the Komodo dragon. The stories didn't frighten Joan, though. She dreamed of studying the dragons up close. On opening day of the reptile house, visitors packed the zoo. They gawked at the geckos. They peered at the pythons. They marveled at the monitors. But when they reached Joan's special enclosure, they gasped. 2 7-foot-long lizards stared back at them. Real-life dragons. Although the visitors were thrilled, Joan was concerned. One of the Komodo dragons, Sumbawa, did not look well. To the shock of the zoo guests, Joan entered the enclosure. She moved Sumbawa to the reptile clinic with the help of 6 nervous keepers. The dragon let Joan clean a sore in his mouth with no fuss at all. In fact, he thanked Joan by licking her face. Joan thought that Sumbawa was brave. The keepers thought that Joan was brave. News of Joan and the Komodo dragon spread. Reporters flocked to the reptile house with questions. Had you ever been bitten? Are you afraid of the dragons? What kind of woman runs a reptile house? Joan wished the reporters would ask about the animals instead. Joan cared for each and every creature in the reptile house. From daily health checks to delicate surgeries, her dedication and talents could not be matched. Scientists all over the world read about Joan's research, her clinical skills, and the success of the reptile house, and she became an international sensation. The Zoological Society of London invited Joan to present her Komodo dragon research at a scientific meeting. As Joan took the stage, she wheeled out Sumbawa, sitting freely atop a large table. The audience squirmed in their seats. Joan stroked Sumbawa's head and fed him a pigeon. He ate it in one gulp. Sumbawa wandered through the audience as Joan explained the reports of Komodo dragons that they were greatly exaggerated. They could grow up to 10 feet, not 30. They ran fast, but not as fast as a motor car. And they could be fierce, but they were mostly gentle. When Joan finished her presentation, Sumbawa returned to her side, and the audience erupted in applause. Joan's passion for reptiles never waned. For the rest of her life, she could be found walking or riding through the zoo with Sumbawa by her side. And just like when she was a little girl, Joan often hosted children's tea parties at the reptile house with her scaly friends, and Sumbawa was the guest of honor. And that is the story of Joan Procter, Dragon Doctor, the woman who loved reptiles. And I believe she treated them with such great care that I bet they loved her too. And we love you at your library. We love you very, very much, and we're thankful for the kindness and love that you show us. I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful night's sleep today, that you dream big dreams, and that all your good dreams come true. Thank you, friends.